My brother insulted me to protect his ego while hiding his financial mess, so I cut the funding. And that's when his life started unraveling. I, a 31-year-old male, grew up in a neighborhood outside Pittsburgh. I was the kid with grease under my fingernails, while my younger brother, Liam, a 29-year-old male, was the one with the pristine report cards. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom with peeling vinyl siding that Dad kept promising to replace next summer. It never happened. Dad worked at the Allegheny steel mill until the layoffs hit in 2008 when the economy tanked. Before that, he'd put in 16 years on the floor, coming home with his work boots caked in metal shavings and that 1,000-yard stare guys get after watching gauges for 12 hours straight. Mom picked up whatever shifts she could at Denny's, sometimes working doubles that left her feet swollen. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Every car repair was a family crisis. Every school trip required budget adjustments. By 17, I knew college wasn't for me. While Liam prepped for his SATs, I was climbing utility poles in an apprenticeship program. On the first day, the journeyman handed me a belt and said, "Drop this, you're fired. Fall, you're dead. Simple enough." Liam got accepted to Penn State with a partial scholarship. Cue the parade of relatives congratulating my parents on raising such a brilliant son. The Facebook posts. The Penn State dad bumper sticker on our rusted-out Chevy. The neighbors asking when they were driving him up to campus. Meanwhile, my decision to become a lineman was met with tight smiles and comments like, "At least it's honest work." My Aunt Carol actually patted my shoulder and said, "Not everyone's cut out for academics, honey." I nodded and fixed her circuit breaker the next weekend when she called in a panic. Those first few years were a grind. Up at 4 in the morning, safety meetings at 5, then 8 to 12 hours of physical labor that left my muscles screaming. Summers in Pennsylvania get brutal. Climbing poles in 95-degree heat with full safety gear isn't something they put in the brochures. Winters were worse. Nothing like hanging suspended 40 feet up during a January ice storm, trying to reconnect power lines while your fingers go numb through 2 pairs of gloves. But I was making money. Real money. Liam came home during his first winter break, wearing a Penn State hoodie and talking about his sociology professor like they were drinking buddies. Dad hung on every word, nodding and asking questions about campus life. When I did make it to dinner, Liam dominated the conversation with stories about his roommate, whose dad owned some tech company. He dropped names of books no one at the table had read, then expressed shock that we weren't familiar with them. "Oliver wouldn't know," he'd say with a smirk when the conversation turned to anything intellectual. "He's more of a hands-on guy." The way he said hands-on made it sound like a learning disability. "Someone's got to keep the lights on while you're discovering yourself," I'd reply, and the table would tense up like I'd farted at communion. I started picking up extra shifts when Liam was home, not just for the money, but for the peace of mind that comes from being away from your own kitchen table. Liam sailed through college with a business degree, landed a corporate job in downtown Pittsburgh at a finance consulting firm, and suddenly he was the golden child who'd made it. The family gatherings became his stage, everyone hanging on stories about his downtown apartment, his networking events, his stock options. He'd be dropping terms like acquisition pipeline and market penetration. Mom would introduce us to her friends. "This is Liam. He's in finance, all proud and straightforward then, and Oliver here does, what do they call it again, sweetheart? Line maintenance," like she couldn't remember the job title of what I'd been doing for 5 years. Truth is, lineman work is solid. The hours can be brutal, especially during storm season when you're up on poles in the worst conditions. But the pay is good. Better than good, actually. By the time I was 27, I was pulling in 6 figures with overtime, $115,000 last year with storm work. I had my 3-bedroom ranch house in North Hills nearly paid off and was setting aside $1,800 a month for retirement. No debt, no flashy spending, just steady building. I bought my place from a retiring couple for $30,000 under market value because I offered $145,000 in cash and a quick close. I'd been living with my buddy Sam in a dump of an apartment for 3 years, banking almost every dollar I made. My parents thought I was crazy until they saw the deed. I fixed the plumbing myself, rewired the outdated electrical panels over a couple of weekends, and installed new energy-efficient windows that cut my heating bill in half. The neighbors nodded approvingly when they saw me patching the roof or power washing the siding, the kind of slow, steady improvement you can actually see. Meanwhile, Liam was living in a downtown loft with exposed brick and industrial fixtures that cost him nearly $3,000 a month in rent. He leased a BMW 3 Series that spent most of its time in a parking garage. Every time we talked, he had a story about some bar where drinks cost $14, or a weekend trip to DC where he'd crashed at a buddy's place and worked with some serious players. But for all his talk about financial acumen, Liam never seemed to be building anything, just spending and talking about spending. He started dating a girl named Melissa around this time. Tall, blonde, always wearing those designer sunglasses even when it was cloudy. She'd roll up to family dinners in designer clothes. My cousin Tim's 30th birthday became the stage for Liam's most public display of brotherly contempt. It was at a brewery downtown. I'd driven straight from a 12-hour shift, still had dirt under my fingernails despite scrubbing them in the brewery bathroom. Liam and Melissa showed up an hour late. He made a show of ordering a round for the table, then launched into a story about his recent business trip to Chicago. "You should have seen this hotel," he was saying. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows. The client practically begged me to extend the trip. Then, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Oh, you'd never believe what some of these executive suites cost per night. Probably what you make in a week, right?" I said, "Wouldn't know. I spend my money on things I actually own." The table gave a collective ooh, like we were back in high school. Liam's face twitched, then he forced a laugh. "That's Oliver for you," he announced to the table. "Practical. That's what happens when you peak in high school shop class." My cousin Tim's wife, Susan, who'd never much cared for Liam's antics, cut in sharply. "Didn't Oliver just finish paying off his house at 27? Liam waved a dismissive hand. "Real estate in the suburbs barely counts. It'll never appreciate the way my downtown loft will." The conversation moved on, but I remembered the look on his face when Susan mentioned my house, like he'd bitten into something sour. That night, I added another $1,000 to my investment account, just out of spite. My parents weren't so lucky after the recession hit. Dad's back finally gave out after years of pain. 2 herniated discs that the company doctor conveniently labeled age-appropriate degeneration to avoid paying disability. Mom's arthritis ended her waitressing career when she dropped a full tray and got written up. Bills piled up, their mortgage went underwater. When they were facing foreclosure, my cousin at the bank tipped me off. I paid their back payments, helped them sell, and found them a decent 2-bedroom in a seniors community. I handled the move myself with a rented U-Haul and 2 buddies from work. Then I started covering their rent, utilities, and groceries. It cost me about $2,100 a month. Not devastating on my salary, but not nothing either. They were grateful at first, embarrassed maybe, but that faded pretty quickly. Soon, it was just expected. Dad would call with, "The cable bill seems high this month," or "We're thinking of getting one of those meal delivery services," always with the assumption that I'd handle it. That summer, I'd been planning a fishing trip to northern Michigan with some guys from work, had it on the calendar for months, paid the deposit for the cabin, bought new gear, the whole deal. 2 days before we were set to leave, Mom called. "Your father's prescription plan changed," she started, that familiar tension in her voice that meant this call was about money. "The new copays are ridiculous, Oliver. Almost $400 this month." I looked at my packed duffel bag sitting by the door, the non-refundable cabin deposit, the cooler I'd already filled with drinks. "I'll transfer the money tomorrow," I said, already mentally calculating what this would do to my monthly budget. I called Sam to let him know I couldn't make the trip, made up something about work scheduling that he probably didn't believe, and used the vacation days to refinish my deck instead. The whole time I wondered what Liam was doing with his paid time off, probably somewhere with an infinity pool, and those drinks that come with tiny umbrellas. Liam knew I was helping them but never offered to pitch in. He was always between bonuses or reallocating his investment portfolio, or some other excuse that meant he wasn't opening his wallet, but he never missed a chance to mention his latest promotion or the fancy client dinner he'd attended. "Must be nice having such a simple job," he'd say sometimes. "No real stress, just physical work." This from a guy whose biggest daily hazard was a paper cut. Then I started dating Amanda, a 28-year-old female, about 3 years ago. She's practical as hell and doesn't take nonsense from anyone. She has a master's in physical therapy, specializing in industrial injury rehabilitation. She works with guys like my dad, trying to get them functional again after years of physical labor. She drives an 8-year-old Subaru that she maintains meticulously, lives within her means, and has a rude awakening for patients who think they can half-ass their recovery exercises. Our third date was at a hardware store. Not intentionally, we'd planned to get dinner, but she mentioned wanting to replace some cabinet hardware. And we somehow ended up spending 2 hours debating the merits of different drawer slides, followed by takeout pizza on her living room floor while sorting screws. Somehow, it was the best date I'd had in years. My parents liked her immediately, probably because she has actual conversations with them, instead of checking her phone every 5 minutes like Liam's rotating cast of girlfriends. She'd ask Dad about his physical therapy progress, showing him better ways to do his exercises. With Mom, she swapped recipes and gardening tips for the little patio container garden they'd started at the apartment. Liam had stopped talking about work specifics by then, just vague mentions of consulting stuff and a new client he couldn't name. He met Amanda at a family dinner and did that thing where he slightly raised his eyebrows, like he was surprised I could land someone like her. So, physical therapy. That must be rewarding, he said. The way he said rewarding making it clear he meant not financially lucrative. Amanda just smiled. I get to help people regain their independence after injuries that would have disabled them permanently 20 years ago. And the pay is solid. Not everyone measures success by their zip code. Liam changed the subject real quick after that. Things got serious between Amanda and me pretty fast. 6 months in, we had keys to each other's places and a regular Sunday morning routine. Around this time, she started noticing the pattern with my parents. How they'd call with emergencies that always seemed to require exactly the amount of money they were short that month. How I'd never say no, even when it meant canceling our plans or shifting my own budget around. "You realize you've postponed that root canal for 8 months now?" she said one night after I'd winced while eating ice cream. We were sitting on my deck, the summer air still warm even after sunset, all while sending your parents money for their cable package upgrade. I shrugged. It's not that bad. The ibuprofen mostly works. Until it doesn't, and you end up needing an extraction that costs twice as much. Your parents have Medicare. They have Social Security. They have options. Your tooth isn't optional, Oliver. They're my parents, I said, as if that explained everything. And you're my partner, she replied. Which means I get to call you on your nonsense when you're setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. 3 days later, I finally went in for the root canal. Amanda drove me home afterward, stopped for my prescription without me asking, and didn't say I told you so even once. That night, while I was still fuzzy from the pain meds, she broke it down for me in a way I couldn't ignore. "I need to know something," she said, sitting at the edge of my bed. "Are we building a future together, or am I just watching you bankroll your family's lifestyle while you put your own life on hold?" The question hit hard. "I want a future with you," I said, the words slightly slurred. "Then we need to talk about boundaries, because right now, you don't have any, and I'm not signing up for a lifetime of being second to your parents' cable bill or Liam's rent crisis." She squeezed my hand. "I love that you're reliable, Oliver. But there's a difference between being dependable and being an ATM." She was right. I knew she was right, but knowing and doing are different things entirely. Last December, things shifted. My parents asked me to come over for coffee on a Sunday. They seemed nervous, which wasn't like them. "Liam's having some financial trouble," Mom said, stirring her coffee endlessly. "He wouldn't want us telling you this, but he's fallen behind on his rent." I sat there processing this. Liam, Mr. Corporate Success, couldn't make rent. "What happened?" I asked. Dad finally looked up. The company did some restructuring. He got moved to a different department, less commission. He's too proud to admit he's struggling. "He'd kill us if he knew we were asking you," Mom added quickly. "But Christmas is coming up and we thought maybe you could help him out, just for a few months until he gets back on his feet." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to laugh after years of Liam's subtle jabs about my blue-collar limitations. The thought of him needing my help was darkly satisfying. "I'll think about it," I said finally. And I did think about it. Amanda thought I should help, not for Liam's sake, but for my parents. They were clearly stressed about it. So I decided to cover 3 months of his rent as a Christmas gift. No strings, no lecture, just cash to bridge the gap. When I told Amanda my plan, her response was measured. "That's generous of you. Just make sure he knows this is help, not a handout. And for God's sake, make him sign something." I laughed. "It's a Christmas gift, not a bank loan." She didn't laugh back. "You're giving your brother, who has never appreciated anything you've done, enough cash to buy a decent used car. At minimum, he should acknowledge it properly." I showed up at my parents' for Christmas Eve with Amanda beside me, the envelope tucked inside my jacket pocket. Liam arrived an hour late with some excuse about traffic. That's when I noticed his girlfriend, Melissa, wasn't with him. They'd been together for almost 2 years at this point, practically joined at the designer labeled Hip. "Where's Melissa?" Mom asked as she handed Liam a drink. "We're taking some time apart," he said shortly, then changed the subject. Throughout dinner, Liam was subdued, missing his usual talk about market trends and business trips. Instead, he asked Dad about his physical therapy and actually seemed to listen to the answer. He complimented Mom's turkey, though we all knew it was dry as sawdust. He even asked Amanda a few questions about her work without the usual condescension. He'd been laying it on thick all night, almost like he knew he needed to earn his seat at the table. But old habits die hard. After dinner, we did the gift exchange. I handed Liam a sealed envelope with $2,400 cash inside, enough for 3 months' rent based on what my parents had told me. No card, no note, just money. He tore it open lazily, thumbed through the bills with raised eyebrows, then looked around the room. Trying to compensate for being a loser in this family, he announced with a smirk. They laughed. Dad snorted into his eggnog. Mom covered her mouth but couldn't hide her smile. Amanda froze beside me, her expression shifting from shock to anger. The room fell silent as I stared at him. No one was laughing anymore. I reached over and snatched the envelope from his hands. "You know what, Liam? You can rot in your own mess that you're trying so hard to hide," I said, my voice steady. "Everyone in this room knows you're broke. Your credit cards are maxed. You're about to be evicted. But sure, laugh at the guy who actually has his life together." His face went pale. I stood up, helped Amanda with her coat, and walked toward the door without looking back. The last thing I heard was Mom calling, "Oliver, don't be so sensitive." We were halfway to the car when Amanda turned around and marched back to the apartment. I followed, not sure what she was planning. She threw open the door without knocking and walked straight back to the living room, where my family sat in awkward silence. "You," she pointed at Liam, "are a pathetic excuse for a brother. You're about to be evicted from your overpriced apartment, and Oliver, who has been supporting your parents while you play businessman, was going to bail you out. No strings attached." She turned to my parents. "And you two are so blinded by your golden child that you laugh when he insults the son who keeps your lights on." The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Then Amanda started laughing. "I cannot believe I just did that. That's not me at all. I'm usually so professional. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. That was the hottest thing I've ever seen." Her laughter faded to a small smile. "Yeah?" I reached for her hand. "No one's ever stood up for me like that before. Just promise me you won't let them walk all over you again," she said. "I don't want to fight your battles. I want to build something with you, I promised." The call started the next morning. He didn't mean it. Just a joke. You know how he gets. I let them all go to voicemail. January brought an ice storm that kept me working 16-hour shifts. When I checked my phone at 2 a.m. after restoring power to a nursing home, I had 6 missed calls from Mom. Ignored them all. 2 days later, Amanda handed me her phone during dinner. A Facebook message from Liam. "Hey Amanda, I feel terrible about Christmas. Oliver's not answering my calls. Maybe we could grab coffee? You seem like someone who gets it." Sent at 1:47 in the morning. Then, an hour later, "You seem like someone who belongs in the city, not stuck with a guy who climbs poles for a living. Maybe in another universe, right? Are you kidding me?" Amanda deleted the messages and blocked him. "Your brother's pathetic." And apparently hits on his brother's girlfriend at 2 a.m. I considered putting Liam through a wall, but that's what he wanted. Proof I was just some blue-collar hothead. I wasn't giving him that satisfaction. Guys like Liam self-destruct without help. 2 weeks after Christmas, my parents showed up at my door unannounced. They stood awkwardly on my front porch. "Liam is behind on rent," Mom said as soon as I let them in. "He's going to be evicted if he doesn't pay by Friday. He regrets what happened," Dad added quickly. "He feels terrible about it." I leaned against my kitchen counter. "If he feels so terrible, why isn't he here telling me himself?" Mom glanced at Dad. "He's too ashamed." But I knew better. It wasn't shame keeping Liam away. It was pride. His ego couldn't handle asking for help, especially from his blue-collar brother, who wasn't supposed to be more successful than him. "Look," I said, keeping my voice even, "I've been paying your rent and bills for 4 years now. Never complained, never held it over your heads. But I'm drawing a line here. If you want to help Liam, help him yourself. You need to make a choice. Either you accept my help and stop defending Liam when he treats me like garbage, or we're done completely. I'm not an ATM." They sat in silence for a long moment. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dad stared at his hands. "We never meant to take you for granted," Dad finally said. "We appreciate everything you do." Mom nodded. "We'll talk to Liam, make him understand." They chose the first option, continued support with a side of basic respect. I wasn't convinced they'd follow through, but it was something. Life went on. I picked up a major storm recovery contract in February that had me working 16-hour days, repairing lines across 3 counties. Then, through the family grapevine, mainly my cousin Steve, who never could keep his mouth shut, I heard Liam was taking loans from relatives, $500 from Uncle Bill, $1,000 from cousin Tim, who'd just gotten a severance package, always with elaborate promises about repayment schedules and interest, always with a story about how it was just a temporary cash flow issue until his next bonus. That cousin also let slip that Melissa had dumped Liam before Christmas when his credit card declined during a dinner at some fancy restaurant. Apparently, she'd called it the last straw after months of bounced checks and excuses. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy, even through my anger. Getting publicly dumped by someone you thought was in your corner has to sting, no matter how much of a jerk you are. That sympathy evaporated a week later when Mom called in tears. She mentioned earlier in the week that she couldn't find her earrings. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Then she dropped the news. Dad's watch was missing, along with her pearl earrings and a few other valuables. She'd confronted Liam, who denied everything with such conviction that she'd almost believed him until she found the pawn receipt in his jeans while doing laundry. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed over the phone. "He's my son, but he stole from us, Oliver." For the first time, she seemed to really see Liam for what he was. "File a police report," I said. "I can't do that to him," she gasped. "Then he'll keep doing it," I replied simply, "and next time it might be your wedding ring." She didn't file a report, but she did ask Liam to move out, which was more backbone than I'd expected. He couch-surfed with increasingly distant acquaintances, eventually landing at our cousin Ryan's place with nowhere else to go. By March, Liam's financial house of cards was collapsing. He'd maxed out credit cards, borrowed from everyone who would answer his calls, and was apparently sleeping in his office some nights to save on gas. But he was still showing up to family dinners in designer shirts, still talking about the vacation he was planning for summer. Meanwhile, Amanda and I were thriving. I got promoted to crew supervisor, which meant better hours and a decent pay bump. I was managing a team of 8 linemen, coordinating with local officials during outages, and handling emergency response protocols. The promotion came with a company truck I could take home and a municipal emergency response certification that added another $4 per hour to my base pay. In April, I proposed. Nothing fancy, just the 2 of us on a weekend hiking trip in the Laurel Highlands. I'd been carrying the ring for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. She said yes before I even finished asking. We set a date for October, just 6 months after the proposal, and sent out invitations to family, including Liam. He didn't show. No call, no text, nothing. The wedding was small, just 50 people at a renovated barn outside the city. It cost us $15,000 all in, which we split down the middle. None of that bride's family pays traditional nonsense. My parents came early to help set up. When Amanda's sister asked where my brother was, Mom jumped in with excuses. He had an important work event. He'd sent his regrets. He was so disappointed to miss it. I just nodded and changed the subject. I wasn't going to let Liam's absence cast a shadow on my wedding day. What my mother didn't know was that I'd run into Liam's roommate, Ryan, at the hardware store a week before the wedding. According to him, Liam had moved from crashing on his couch to formally renting a room, then disappeared, owing 2 months' rent and taking Ryan's Xbox and golf clubs with him. No forwarding address, just gone one Tuesday while Ryan was at work. Ryan told a few people he was thinking about taking legal action, said he kept all the receipts and texts, just in case. He asked if I knew where Liam was staying. I didn't, and that was the truth. My brother had gone ghost, not just on me but apparently on everyone except our parents. 4 months into marriage, life was good. Amanda and I were talking about starting a house fund for something a bit bigger, maybe with land for a workshop where I could restore the '67 Mustang I'd had my eye on. I'd been obsessed with the '67 Mustang since I saw one at a car show with my uncle when I was 12. It was fire engine red with chrome trim that looked like jewelry. I'd promised myself I'd get one someday. Then my mother called on a Tuesday night in February. "Liam's in trouble," she said, her voice tight. "His friend Ryan is suing him for unpaid loans and the stolen stuff. It's going to court next month if he doesn't come up with the money." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to say it was Liam's problem to solve. He'd made his choices. "He's in really bad shape, Oliver," she continued when I didn't speak. "I've never seen him like this. He's been staying with us for the past month." That was news to me. I'd stopped by their apartment just 2 weeks ago to fix their garbage disposal, and there had been no sign of Liam. "He leaves before you usually come by and comes back late," she admitted. "He didn't want you to know." "Where exactly?" Mom hesitated. "On the sofa. He stays out most days, looking for work." "Looking for work, right. More likely hiding from debt collectors or pawning whatever else he could get his hands on." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He needs help, Oliver. Real help this time." Amanda and I talked it over that night. She was understandably hesitant. "He's never apologized to you," she pointed out. "Not once in all this time." She was right. But family is complicated. If, and that's a big if, you decide to help him, it needs to be on your terms, she said. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door around 9 in the evening. Liam stood on my porch looking like absolute hell. I almost didn't recognize him. I let him in. We sat at my kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between us that neither of us touched. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and thick. "So," I finally said, "Mom tells me you're being sued." He nodded, eyes on the table. "Ryan loaned me $15,000 last year. I kept telling him I'd pay him back after my next bonus, but there was no bonus," I finished for him. "There hasn't been a bonus in almost 2 years," he admitted quietly. The department restructuring was actually a demotion. I've been barely making base salary since then. I leaned back in my chair. And all those networking events, the client dinners, the stock options? He gave a hollow laugh. I was grabbing free appetizers at open house events and sleeping on Ryan's couch 3 nights a week to save on utilities. The stock options were real, but they're underwater now. The silence came back, heavier this time. I waited. This was his show to run. I haven't been fair to you. You could say that, I replied. He fiddled with the handle of his mug. I always thought I'd be, I don't know, more than I am now. You always thought you're too good to be a decent brother. His head snapped up. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You've been showing it for years. He looked away again. I screwed up, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I made bad choices. I've been living on credit cards and nonsense for 2 years because I was too proud to admit I got demoted, too proud to downsize my apartment or sell my car. It wasn't a great apology, but it was honest. And honesty from Liam was rarer than a pension plan these days. And now you need me to bail you out, I said, not a question. Look, I need help, Ollie, he said finally. I'm drowning here. Ryan's lawsuit is just the beginning. There are others who could come after me, and I'm already behind on rent again at Mom and Dad's place. I studied my brother's face, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. Behind the designer stubble and the practiced confidence, he looked scared and tired, very tired. I drummed my fingers on the table, letting him sit with the silence. You've spent years mocking my job, I finally said, like I wasn't good enough. You mocked me at Christmas when I tried to help you. You hit on my woman. He flinched at each point. And now you're here, asking me to clean up your mess. I know I don't deserve it, he said, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I let out a long breath. All right, listen. I'll help with the lawsuit amount, but this isn't a gift. It's a loan with actual terms. You'll sign a legal promissory note. You'll pay me back on a schedule we agree on, and you'll get financial counseling. I know a guy who specializes in debt management. The relief on his face was immediate. Anything. Whatever you need me to do, brother. And one more thing, I added. No more nonsense. No more pretending. If you're struggling, you say so. To me, to Mom and Dad, to everyone. The act stops now. He nodded. Okay. And you need to find your own place. Mom and Dad's apartment is too small, and you're stressing them out. Where am I supposed to go? I can't afford rent anywhere decent. Nowhere is decent enough for you. That's the problem right there. I stood up, figure it out. Get a roommate. Move to a cheaper neighborhood. Do what normal people do when they can't afford something. They adjust. He looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Fine. The next day I transferred the money and had my lawyer draw a paperwork, not some handshake agreement, but a legally binding document with payment terms, interest, and consequences for default. Liam signed without hesitation. I don't know if he'll keep his word about repayment. History suggests otherwise, but that's almost secondary at this point. It's been 6 months since then. Liam found a new job, something entry-level at an insurance company, a far cry from his finance glory days, but stable. He's making payments on the loan, small but regular. He moved into a shared apartment with 2 guys from his new job. Nothing fancy, but he's making it work. He comes over for dinner sometimes. It's still awkward, but he's trying. Last week, he helped me install a new water heater without being asked. He didn't know a pipe wrench from a crescent wrench, but he handed me tools and learned the difference quickly enough. We're never going to be best friends. Too much water under that bridge, but we're figuring out how to be brothers again. Amanda and I closed on 5 acres outside the city limits last month. The house needs work, outdated kitchen, carpeting that should have been replaced a decade ago, a roof that'll need attention within a year, but it's solid. Good bones, as they say. And most importantly, it has a detached 3-car garage that's perfect for a workshop. I spent last weekend running new electrical to the garage, setting up proper workbenches along the walls. The '67 Mustang arrived on a flatbed 2 weeks ago. It's more rust than car at this point. The previous owner let it sit in a field for 15 years before deciding to sell. The 289 engine is seized solid, will need a complete rebuild or replacement. And the interior is home to what seems like several generations of mice. There's even a small sapling growing through the passenger side floorboard. Rust has eaten half the floor pans, and the quarter panels look like Swiss cheese. Perfect project car. Amanda took one look at it and laughed. This will keep you busy until retirement, she said. That's the point. I've spent most of my adult life fixing other people's problems. This car is my project. No deadline, no emergency, just the slow, methodical process of bringing something back to life on my own schedule. Liam comes by sometimes to help with the car. He's useless with tools, but surprisingly good at finding obscure parts online. For his birthday, I handed him a greasy carburetor that needed rebuilding. The look on his face was priceless, like I'd given him a dead rat. But the next weekend he showed up with a rebuilt part and a smug expression. YouTube tutorials, he explained when I raised an eyebrow. As for my parents, they've adjusted too. They still call when they need help, but they ask now instead of assume. Dad has started taking a woodworking class at the senior center, making picture frames and small shelves that he insists on giving us, even though they're slightly crooked. Mom sends home containers of soup that Amanda actually enjoys, not just tolerates. Last month they called to tell me they were cutting back on their cable package to save money. No drama, no hints about me covering the difference, just matter-of-factly letting me know they were making adjustments to their budget like rational adults. Small steps. Sometimes I wonder where I'd be if I just kept saying yes, if I'd never drawn that line at Christmas, never made Liam sign that loan agreement, never stood up for myself. Still signing over chunks of my paycheck without question? Still postponing my own life to subsidize everyone else's? Probably. But that's not how it played out. And while it took me too many years to learn this lesson, at least I finally did. Being reliable doesn't mean being used by people. Helping others doesn't mean neglecting yourself. And sometimes the most generous thing you can do for the people you love is to stop enabling their worst habits. Last Sunday, Liam came over unannounced with a box of parts he'd found for the Mustang. We spent 3 hours in comfortable silence, working on the engine block. As he was leaving, he handed me an envelope with his latest loan payment, 2 weeks early. I got a small bonus, he said, with none of his old swagger. Figured I should put it toward this.